The following episode contains references to harassment, intimidation, and stalking. Listen with care.
I left, actually it was a birthday gift to myself in September 2005.
That gift to herself for her 41st birthday was something Linda Opdycke had long desired, a separation from her husband, Mark Stover.
I moved out of the main house of my family's property up to a small guest house on the property.
But while Linda put some space between herself and Mark, she didn't leave Kickett Island, home to their profitable dog training business, Island Dog Adventures.
I stayed there for a number of months to see if Mark would finally understand the seriousness that I really would be leaving if we could not build a relationship and he would seek help.
At that point, they'd been together for 14 years, the last 3 as a married couple. After nearly 7 months, Linda finally decided she was ready.
I drove down from the house that I was staying at down to the main house, and I told him that I wanted a divorce. And he, right there and then, I could tell he just snapped. He went just sheer white. His eyes went just crazy. He clenched his hands and fists, and he was just in a shaking rage with me.
Startled, Linda said she stayed as calm as she could and tried to lower the temperature by offering to talk, but could tell she needed to leave. She got into her Suburban and drove back to the guest house.
I knew I just had a short period of time to grab a bag and leave.
As she gathered her things, Linda could see Mark heading in her direction.
And he comes out of the car and he's, shaking his fists. He says, "You've got war. I'm not going to grant this to you. You've got a big fight on your hands."
In April 2006, Linda said she fled Kickett Island, a property her family owned. She was now on the run.
Well, instantly at that point when I left, he was calling me constantly. It was obsessive phone calls on my cell phone, trying to reach me. He would call, 40, 50 times that evening.
She kept her whereabouts a secret.
I left the area and was just traveling around with my dog in a suitcase in hotels, just trying to move through the state. He'd leave messages on my cell phone that he was driving all over the state to try to find me.
This is war. This is goddamn war. You're wrecking my... You've wrecked my life enough.
Linda spent the summer and fall of 2006 in Sisters, Oregon. That December, she relocated to the Western-themed town of Winthrop, Washington. The downtown included an antique boardwalk and old-time saloons. Linda got a house outside of town. She put more than 250 miles of winding roads and a mountain range between her and Mark.
I left the whole west side of the state.
She tried everything to avoid leaving a trail.
I immediately stopped my credit card accounts. I was worried that he would follow me there. I got a mailing address in Bellevue. I tried to close contact with anything where I could be tracked.
But Mark, an avid hunter, still managed to track Linda down. On October 16, 2007, at about 7 a.m., Linda said she was getting ready to start her day.
I just stepped out of my shower right here, and I heard my dog, Soju, in the backyard barking incredibly loud, very defensive, like I've never heard her bark before.
Linda scanned the hillside overlooking her house.
And I see Mark Stover hunkered down with a hunting rifle pointed right at me through the window, looking through his spotting scope.
According to Linda, the man she left was crouched down like a lion, preparing to pounce on his prey.
I really did feel that my life was in danger.
That incident would be one of many in which Linda said her life was threatened. I'm Peter Van Sant. From 48 Hours, this is Trained to Kill: The Dog Trainer, the Heiress, and the Bodyguard. Episode 2, The Hunter.
I walked away from almost literally everything except for my own investments that I had before I met him.
In the spring of 2006, Linda Opdycke was perfectly fine leaving everything behind, if that meant getting away from her husband, Mark Stover. We spoke about this in 2010.
How much money was the business making? How successful was it?
It became very successful. At the time I left in September 2005, it was just under $1 million a year that it was making.
That's extraordinary.
It really is.
Linda said she took none of that money with her when she left.
Well, I put in over $100,000 as startup capital into the business. I can't recall what the divorce settlement was, but it was not much over $100,000. I did not get any retirement benefits out of it. I got no proceeds from the business.
But she said Mark still wanted more. She said his rage and incessant calls pushed her to give him what he wanted. According to Linda, Mark demanded she return one of her dogs to the island.
He told me that he would track me down to no end until he could have the dog back. So I thought that if I gave the dog back, that he would leave me alone.
But Linda said that wasn't enough either. Karen Lundgren worked at a salon near Linda's house in Winthrop. She told me about a frightening moment when Mark dramatically entered the salon.
Linda Opdycke was here, and I was sitting here.
What were you doing?
I was doing a European facial on her. And of course, she's lying down like this. And Mr. Stover came in and moved the screen and walked right in and stood here.
Just barges right in.
Just stood right here.
She sat Linda up.
She said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Well, I saw your vehicle, so I thought I'd just stop in and see you." And
Just saw your vehicle. He lives more than 150 miles away from here.
right.
Karen was sure Mark hadn't just stumbled upon Linda's car. He'd somehow crossed a mountain range and tracked her down. The two spoke, and Karen said Mark left after a few minutes. But Linda said Mark's stalking behavior didn't stop at the beauty salon.
He came into my bedroom, somehow gotten into my house, came into my bedroom.
Linda said he had an uncanny ability to get inside her home.
I was in bed about 9 o'clock at night, and he walks in and he's got a gun in his hand. He told me he had just driven 18 hours straight from Montana. Then he gets on his knees bedside, puts the gun right on my pillow right next to my head, and then starts sobbing and is very emotional about not wanting to let the divorce go.
She tried to stay calm and sat with him until he decided to leave. Linda said instead of calling the police, she tried to handle those kinds of unwanted visits herself.
You're just dealing with what you see at the time and trying not to escalate his behavior and get him upset off the chart to hurt me. Another big reason why I did not make a report initially on a number of things is I knew he would deny being here.
But she didn't think her tactics were working. She found herself feeling increasingly paranoid.
So you'd hear any noise and you're wondering, is it Mark? The phone would ring, you're wondering, is it Mark?
Yes. You wondered any time you went outside with Mark there, then you're pulling the blinds, you're living behind closed blinds all the time. And you're trying to just move on with your life, and it's very, very difficult. It was very difficult.
On November 2nd, 2007, Linda couldn't hide her fear anymore. She called 911 after Mark came to her house and chased her in his Chevy Suburban as she tried to drive away.
And he came flying down my driveway and down the road, following me at a rapid speed into Winthrop.
Linda said the police contacted Mark but didn't make an arrest. How was Mark, after all these incidents, still walking free? Soon after, Mark discovered something about Linda that truly pushed him over the edge. It involved Mark's friend and hunting partner. It had been more than 2 years since Linda's decision to leave Mark. Linda told me that Mark had forced her down a terrifying path, dodging and hiding from his harassment. But there was someone in his corner who didn't believe Linda's accusations. Someone who's known Mark longer than Linda. His sister, Victoria Simmons.
My brother adored Linda Opdycke. Just loved her.
It was hard for my brother to lose someone he loved. That was difficult for him. And he would take a while to find his bearings and move on.
She said that Mark was devastated by the separation.
He was blindsided. He told me he thought everything was fine.
Victoria doesn't believe her brother was as much of a danger as Linda Opdycke claimed.
He was terribly hurt. Not only was it a surprise, but the circumstances surrounding it were so painful. Double betrayal.
Mark discovered that Linda once got some drinks and went to the house of John Opdycke, Mark's best man at their wedding.
It shook his foundation. He was just so angry that 2 really valuable relationships in his life were destroyed in one fell swoop. If she wanted to hurt him and really knock his feet out from under him, having an affair with John Opdycke would be about the worst thing she could choose to do.
Here's Linda again.
John Opdycke is a person that has known Mark for many years, and I met him shortly after meeting Mark, probably in 1992, and he was a friend to both of us. Once John learned of Mark's antics and behavior towards me, he ceased having friendship with Mark.
You developed a relationship with John Opdycke, is that right?
Yes.
A romantic relationship?
Very briefly, we had an intimate occurrence.
Linda said she got a call from Mark the day after she and John were together. He told her that he knew what they'd done.
Described in detail of what had occurred between John and myself that evening.
And was it accurate?
Yes, it was accurate. It was horrifying.
So, do you believe that someone was at John Opdycke's house watching you be intimate with John?
Yes, I do. And after hearing that from Mark, I actually drove down with a friend down there to see if I could find any signs of Mark being there. And I went down there and saw tire tracks of where the Suburban was parked. I saw footprints of his LL Bean boots. They have a very distinct tread. I could see them along the fence line and up to the house, and John told me that he saw the same thing and received phone calls from Mark saying that he was in his house as well at other times.
She said that John was horrified and fearful of Mark.
He wrote me a letter saying that he needed to cease any friendship or relationship with me due for the safety of him, his children, And he advised me to do the same thing, to take all precautions that I could for my safety and well-being as he was.
When Mark found out about John, he was so angry that Linda decided to go stay with her father in Hawaii until things cooled down. She returned several weeks later, in January 2008, when Mark finally signed the divorce papers. Linda still didn't think having the divorce finalized would make Mark stop, so she reached out to the local sheriff's office to let them know she was worried.
My initial advice to her is immediately get a protection order.
Here's then Chief Deputy Dave Rodriguez with the Okanagan County Sheriff's Office. He told Linda that if she got a protective order, law enforcement could act more decisively.
To where if you do make even these loose kind of threats, we can do something about it. But without a protection order, it's harder.
Did Linda seek it out?
She didn't.
She didn't?
She did not.
Why not?
I have no idea.
Linda said she was now relying on the advice of security experts she hired.
They felt this particular type of personality, that getting a domestic violence protection order and contacting the police could possibly escalate the situation.
Some of the sheriff department staff still tried to help Linda, even though she wouldn't file for a protective order. After hours, once they got off the clock, they agreed to help Linda. Here's Sergeant Gene Davis.
We felt, at least I felt, the threat was severe enough that we did every option we could to help her out by training a protection dog, similar to a police dog, but it's more designed if somebody came to her house and tried to harm her, her dog would protect her.
What kind of dog did she have?
She had a young female German Shepherd.
And those are good guard dogs, right?
A very good dog. I have one myself.
Linda specifically wanted a dog that hadn't been trained by Mark and had no connection to him. Remember, she only met Mark because she needed him to train one of her dogs for protection. And now she was training a dog against that same man. But Linda concluded that wasn't enough. She wanted even more security.
I installed cameras onto my house to add to the security system.
Linda got into a routine of checking her cameras every day and reviewing footage. Her instincts proved to be right. While the divorce had been finalized, Linda said it seemed nothing would stop Mark from harassing her. Linda said one of her cameras spotted a ghostly black and white image of Mark in the middle of the night.
It was very creepy, very eerie, very scary, knowing he was here. And then seeing his body language, and he went underneath the house, and all of a sudden you can tell he had recognized that there was cameras here, and then he's seen 2 minutes later walking away with the shirt pulled over his head and sneaking off the property.
We reviewed the footage, and you can see a man crossing Linda's lawn, pulling up a shirt to cover his face. She said Mark started calling her, demanding she give back their wedding photos. Here's a voicemail of Mark threatening Linda. It's a little hard to hear, but Mark is saying, "I swear to God, if I ever find out that you're in possession of those wedding pictures, you know I'm a guy who can hold a grudge." At one point, Linda was convinced that Mark tapped her phones and was listening to her calls.
I knew for a fact that he was on my phones because I was talking to my stepmother, and she was telling me about how the Montana police were utilizing tasers, and she was asking me if I knew anything about tasers for one of my self-defense tools. And Mark called and left a message and said, "You gals sitting around talking about tasering me and shooting me," and he says, "I would have let you shoot me at one point in time, but now I'm going to survive this just to ruin your life."
Fearing that Mark's campaign of harassment was now escalating toward violence, Linda started brainstorming both battle and escape plans.
Getting all those firearms, was that wise or was that paranoia?
I think it was very wise. I'm dealing with somebody that was incredibly skilled with firearms. He was somebody that would go on hunting trips, and he would stay on his hunting trips until he acquired his hunt, his kill. And I knew this was somebody that could take my life. It was a real threat.
To her, Mark had proven he was willing to cross any boundary she set. Linda decided to turn her house into a fortress.
I have a safe room in there. I have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C if he comes in this door, if he comes into my bedroom, if he breaks in downstairs.
She gave me a tour of her hidden arsenal.
This one was put in the living room entryway area. Obviously, I'm very vulnerable in this area.
We walked from room to room as she pointed out the spots where she was hiding her guns.
There's this magnet right here.
Yes.
So there was a gun hooked onto that.
Yes.
She had one in her office, one next to her bed, and one in the hallway, another behind a wall hanging. It seems she was never more than 6 feet away from a firearm.
The security company installed a magnet for me to have bedside.
As she guided me through her security system, I couldn't help but think how this reminded me of something out of a James Bond movie. I had never seen so many guns in a home in my life.
I knew exactly what they were, so in a time of stress that I could count on them being there. It wasn't like, well, where's my firearm? Do I have it on me to defend myself? They were always consistently there.
Linda felt certain that Mark would eventually try to hurt, maybe even kill her. But until she had hard evidence, a witness, or filed for a protection order, sheriff's deputies couldn't arrest him. Then, on March 18, 2008, at about 10 a.m., Linda's neighbor, Ruthie Hagmeister, was on her way over to visit.
We were going to do some cooking together and then take our dogs for a walk. As I pull up here, I notice there's a white station wagon here, and there's a gentleman over at Linda's trash cans taking the trash out of the trash cans.
Right across the street
Right
here.
across the street.
Ruthie was immediately suspicious and pulled her car right up to this man's white station wagon.
I blocked this car. I did. I blocked this car, and I proceeded to get out of my car. I left my door open, and I asked the gentleman, I said, "Excuse me, who are you?" He says, "My name is John." I go, "Why are you taking my friend's trash?" And he's like, "I have permission to take the trash." You have permission to take someone's trash. How can you have permission to take someone's trash?
You're not buying it.
No, I'm not buying it at all. So I proceed to say, okay, well, we'll find out. I walk around my truck to the passenger door. My cell phone's on the seat. Pick up my cell phone, and I dial Linda's house. I'm like, "Linda, there's a man down here." In the meantime, he's getting the trash, throwing it in his car, closing the door. I'm like, "There's a man down here stealing your trash."
And I said, no, I couldn't believe it. And she said, yes. She starts describing who this person is, and it's Mark.
While Ruthie was on the phone, Mark got back in his car and drove off.
And Ruthie's like, no, this is, something's really wrong with this. And we're like, wow. So finally somebody's seen him. There's a witness to him being here. So she calls 911, and that was, he finally got pulled over for that.
After more than 2 years of what Linda described as a campaign of harassment and fear, the county finally had enough evidence to charge Mark with stalking and theft. Mark entered what's called an Alford plea. That's when someone claims to be innocent, but admits there's enough evidence that a judge or jury will likely find them guilty. Mark was sentenced to 2 years probation and 12 months of anger management. The court also entered a protection order against him, which meant Mark had to turn over all of his weapons and never go near Linda ever again. Linda was not satisfied with the sentence.
He got a slap on the hand, and it was very disheartening to me.
Throughout 2008 and into 2009, Linda repeatedly called the sheriff's office to report suspicious activity she thought could be Mark. But she was never able to link those situations to him, but stayed vigilant about her security. And in the summer of 2008, Linda made a decision that would forever change her life. She hired a former security consultant to do an assessment of her house.
I did an analysis of sort of her home security situation and what the steps she was taking, looked into the people that she was working with, and made some suggestions on that front.
His name was Michael Oakes. He was a gun and safety enthusiast. Similar to her relationship with Mark, things started professionally, but soon became something more.
Did you fall in love with her?
I did.
That same summer, Mark left Kickett Island for Anacortes, Washington, about 10 miles away. He bought several acres and a new house on Thompson Road, where he opened his new business. His sister Victoria said Mark even started dating someone new, Teresa Vox Michael.
He was amazing. He would drive down almost every weekend, take me to dinner.
To those around him, Mark really seemed to have moved on.
He was joking with me all the time, and he was always fun, when we were on the phone, and yeah, he was very happy.
Then, in October 2009, Linda heard from one of Mark's employees.
And she informed me via email late in the afternoon that Mark was missing. I was very concerned that he would be coming over my way.
But detectives had a different theory. They believed Mark was dead. From 48 Hours, this is Trained to Kill, The Dog Trainer, The Heiress, and The Bodyguard, produced by Sony Music Entertainment. I'm your host, Peter Van Sant. Judy Tigard is the executive producer of 48 Hours. Original reporting by 48 Hours producers Ryan Smith and Liza Finley. Jamie Benson is the senior producer for Paramount Audio, and Maura Waltz is the senior story editor. Recording assistance from Alan Pang and Reginald Bazile. Special thanks to Paramount Podcast Vice President Megan Marcus. It is written and produced by Alex Schumann. Stephanie Serrano is our editor. Our executive producer is Shira Morris. Our associate producer is Zoe Culkin. Theme and original music composed by Hansdale Shee. Cedric Wilson is our sound designer and mixed the episodes. We also use music from APM and Epidemic Sounds. Fendel Fulton is our fact checker. Our production manager is Tamika Balance-Kolasny. I'm Peter Van Sant. If you're enjoying the show, be sure to rate and review. It helps more people find it and hear our reporting. You can listen to Trained to Kill early and ad-free right now by subscribing to 48 Hours Plus on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening.